Welcome to part 2 of our trilogy making horror movie posters. We got tutorials and a contest. Hey guys, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning fun, and October is getting to a fun start. We've got so many great entries for the horror movie contest. Basically, the entire month, we're gonna be making tutorials teaching you how to create horror movie posters, and at the same time, you can create your own horror movie posters and submit them on Phlearn.com. You can just follow the link on your screen right now, or in the description right down below, and you could win a year of Phlearn Pro. So here's the deal, create your own original horror movie poster. And this is stressing on the DIY side of things. So don't get like all kinds of fancy, expensive equipment and crazy stuff. This is more like make instead of buy. This is like, what can you find around your house? What can you pull together to create these fun images? That's the spirit of the contest. It shouldn't cost you much money. And those are the entries that we're going to look who can win a free month or a free year of Phlearn Pro. So for this week's image, we started off with a simple concept, which was basically like the idea when coffee mixes with creamer, you know, it creates that like really cool effect. And it kind of reminded me of like blood and kind of like gore. And I was like, I want to mix that effect into like a movie poster. So we brainstormed and came up with a barista living in a coffee shop, kills people and then puts their parts into coffee. I know that's absolutely disgusting, but it's a horror movie and it's a take on Sweeney Todd. So we wanted to get a little bit of humor across there and create like a graphic style image that would be both like horror and coffee shop and of course a homage to Sweeney Todd. Now the photo shoot here was incredibly simple. Basically we just filled a container with coffee, just regular black coffee, set that on a tripod, had the camera ready set to go, and we just snapped some pictures as creamer was being added to the container. So we could get that really cool separation effect between the dark coffee and the light creamer, and we can use the transition between those in our actual image. So basically the coffee and the creamer was the only thing we photographed for this image. The rest of this was stock images and some logo and type work. So it doesn't take a bunch of money, it doesn't take a bunch of time to make one of these posters. You get a really cool result with just a little bit of creativity and some fun. Let's go ahead and start compositing our images together for this poster in Photoshop. All right guys, let's go ahead and put this thing together. So starting off in Photoshop, you can see I've actually got a lot on my screen, and I went ahead and did all this ahead of time. In fact, it took about 3 or 4 hours to like really pull everything together, tried a bunch of different designs, and then came up with this one, which I'm really happy with. So these are all the elements that were used in creating that image, but obviously you never know exactly what you're gonna have before you start. So it's always an exploration process, but we're gonna show you basically how we put together our horror movie image. So we're gonna start off with this image that we photographed, and this is the coffee mixing with the creamer. So let's hit F for full screen, and we're just gonna go one image at a time. We'll keep this step by step. You guys will be able to follow along with the entire thing. Okay, so the first thing that I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and crop this like a movie poster. So I'm gonna hit C for the crop tool. Okay, and I'm gonna click and drag my corners here, and we're just gonna go up in this direction. We want this to be in about the right aspect ratio for a movie poster. Now, there's no like right or wrong here, but generally they are in portrait orientation. So we're just kind of cropping it just like this. And you can always add or remove vertical height anytime you want to. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and hit that checkbox up there. Now, the next thing I want to do is kind of get everything ready. I mean, we basically just have this like coffee creamer, which it looks really, really cool. But we need to get it ready and basically have it look like it's integrating into, you know, the rest of the image. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a solid color adjustment layer. Okay, let's go all the way down to black. There we go. And we're going to put this on the very bottom. Now here for our coffee, I'm just gonna simply click on my layer mask icon, okay? And then we're going to make a selection here. Now in this case, I'm gonna use the rectangular marquee tool. We're just gonna make a selection right over there. And here on my layer mask, I'm gonna hit Shift Delete. We're just gonna fill that with black, okay? So the idea here is, there we go, let's do the same thing with here. The idea is that we want this basically to look like the coffee is going, like the creamer rather, is going right into the black coffee. All right, that looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and click on our layer mask, and we're going to go just a little bit more in depth here. We're going to just paint black right along our edges here. And the reason we're doing this, we don't want this, like, you can see there's a clear line that's going to be visible here. We don't want that line to be visible. All right, there we go. So let's just continue painting black on our layer mask, and we're just basically going to clean this up. So the thing that you see just at the very end here, at the very edge, is that little bit of creamer. All right, and this doesn't have to be perfect. In just a second, we're going to grab a levels adjustment layer, and we're just going to darken this down a little bit. All right, so you can see that already looks pretty good. Now let's grab an adjustment layer. We're going to go to levels, and I'm going to hit Option Command G to clip the levels to the coffee. So it's only, this levels adjustment layer is only going to affect the coffee. And we're going to just take our blacks, and I'm going to drag this from the left to the right just a little bit. There we go. And you can see basically what that's doing is any of this area that was just a little bit gray, it's just going to like take it all the way back down to black. So you can see it's just kind of like darkening that up. So already we're looking pretty good. We've got our coffee and our black background. Now I'm going to go ahead and scale this up. So let's go ahead and group those together. Control or Command G. I'm going to hit Control or Command T for our transform, and we're just going to start scaling this up a little bit. We just want it to be a little bit larger here. And in this case, we're using this like as a texture, so I don't mind if it is like kind of larger than it would normally be. Okay, and you can move this around and, you know, do all kinds of fun stuff with it, but in this case, we're just going to put it right about there. Now, the next thing I want to do is take care of the bottom part of it, because you can see we're kind of, I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more. You can see we're like basically have this little table down here at the bottom. So I'm going to create a new layer and use my brush tool, just sample this color, and I'm just going to paint it in. So hold Alt or Option to sample this color, and I'm just going to simply paint it in right over here with the brush tool. Now this is a really, really quick, easy fill basically. All right, and I know it doesn't have any texture on it now. What we're going to do, I'm going to make a large brush and just make this a little bit softer and bring my flow down to about 10%. And we're just going to add a little bit of color variation. So you can see I'm just kind of grabbing the colors there and painting them in. There we go. All right, so I just wanted to blend in basically. All right, cool. That looks good. Now I do want to add a little bit of texture onto what I've got down here. So to get this texture on this area where I just painted with a brush tool, all I have to do is create a new layer, and I'm just going to use my healing brush tool. So healing brush tool is really cool. A lot of people use the healing brush tool for like spot removal, like if you have a zit or something like that, the healing brush tool is awesome for that, but it'll also copy texture onto areas that don't have any texture. So if you need to just paint an area with a brush tool like I just did, not a big deal. You can always copy texture from another area on top of that, and it'll make it look like it has like actual photographic texture. So let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to make our brush a little bit larger. We'll go ahead and sample by holding Alt or Option. There we go. We're sample right over here. And I'm just going to paint right over here. And you're going to see, basically it's going to take the texture from wherever I sample and the color from wherever I paint, and it's going to start to blend those two together. All right, and this is just going to kind of become like a mishmash of a bunch of different textures and colors and stuff like that. I'm not looking for like, you know, a ton of definition here. I'm just looking for a little bit more than what we started with. Now, if anything looks like it repeats, if anything's like super obvious that like, hey, it looks like, you know, the same exact thing you had over there just looks like it's showing up in a different place, just paint right over it again with the healing brush tool. There we go. All right, so you can see that pattern texture right there looks like it repeats. So just sample right up there and then kind of paint it away there a little bit. Anything that looks like it's just like recognizably repeating or like using an area from your photo like a little bit too much, not a big deal. Just go ahead and sample it away and paint it away. Okay, so you can see that looks pretty good. It looks like we have like actual like coffee creamer or whatever texture going on here on the bottom. So literally just started with a brush tool, and then we just used the healing brush tool to add that texture. So if nothing else, that's a really cool lesson on how you can add texture anywhere on your image. Okay, now our background is pretty well, we're looking pretty good, and I like this effect. It kind of looks like fire, it totally looks like coffee, and for this like, you know, Sweeney Todd coffee look-alike, whatever image we're doing, I think it totally fits what we needed. So next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and bring our subject into this, and we got a lot to do with the subject, but basically we're gonna be cutting the subject out of the background, and then we're gonna make it look like the subject has overalls, like, you know, like if they were at a coffee shop, not overalls, an apron. There we go, and we're gonna throw a logo on there. So let's go ahead and pull our subject into this photo. Okay, so we're ready to start putting our subject together. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab our subject here. Let's go ahead and move our subject into the image, and I'm gonna go ahead and let's hit F for full screen. We're gonna make our image nice and large here, and in this case it's okay if we lose a little resolution. All these are gonna be is just silhouettes. So we'll make our image a little bit larger, but you know, before we do, I'm actually gonna cut off a large part of our image. Let's just use our marquee tool. There we go, and I can just select the left and the right part of this image because I know for a fact that I don't need it. I just need my subject here. So I'm just gonna delete those. And we're gonna hit Control or Command T and just scale our subject up a bit. There we go. This is going to be the demon of the coffee shop. It's gonna be such an awesome image. I can't wait for it. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And we can always change these settings at any point in time. Now, the next thing I want to do here is we're going to go to, basically I want to make our subject a silhouette. So I'm going to go to Select, and we're going to go down to Select Color Range. And I'm going to select the color range right here on my subject. So you can see, in this case, we'll bring our fuzziness up just a little bit. All right, that looks pretty good. It's going to select our subject, a little bit of this grass and stuff behind it, but that's okay. We can work with that selection. Not a big deal. All right, so let's hit OK there. Now, with that selection active, basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new layer, okay? And on this new layer, I'm gonna fill this with black. So let's go to Edit, down to Fill, and we're gonna go to Fill with black. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, in this case, let's make those invisible. In this case, we have basically our subject in silhouette filled with black, which looks great. Now, I need to get rid of some other stuff. So we're just gonna use our marquee tool here, okay? We're gonna just select some of this stuff out here and delete that out. And then here, I'm gonna do this relatively roughly. We're gonna use our lasso tool, and I'm gonna go in here and just kind of make a rough selection right around here. There we go, and delete that out. You can use layer masks here if you want. Basically, I'm just trying to get my subject back into silhouette form. All right, without any of the other distractions on there. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and make our background visible here. All right, and in this case, I'm already seeing that maybe I need to just drag my background just a little bit higher up. There we go. Not a big deal. And if I need to fill in more information right down there, well, it's really easy to do. Simply, basically, we just did this a second ago. I'm just gonna click and paint in with this same coffee color, and then on this layer, I'm just gonna use my healing brush tool. There we go, and just fill in a little bit more texture. All right, so this is super cool, and while you're creating your own movie poster, while you're making your own graphics and things like that, things are gonna change all the time. So if you're not like perfectly set on it, you know exactly what's going to be in the end photo when you start, that's totally normal. So, you know, it should take a while to kind of like make everything fit together and look the way you want it to. So don't worry if it's not coming together in the first few minutes. It literally took probably 3 or 4 hours of a couple of us here working on this for it to come together. So now you know, it's a process. Okay. So we have our background here. Let's go ahead and double click on here. I'm gonna call this background, and I'm gonna group my subject with herself, and I'm gonna call this subject. There we go, and we can delete this layer. Okay, so our subject's looking pretty good. The next thing we're gonna do is bring in our little horns here. Okay, so really easy to do. All I have to do is select my magic wand tool. I'm gonna select actually outside of this area. Let's go ahead and bring our tolerance a little bit higher. Let's go a little bit more. Tolerance just basically determines how much you're going to actually select. Okay, so a tolerance of about 25 looks pretty good. Now on a new layer, I'm going to inverse my selection. So let's go to select, down to inverse. There we go. And I'm going to go to edit, down to fill, and we're going to fill this with black. Okay, so now we have some horns that are black. All right. You know what? In this case, you can see they're a little bit like jaggedy looking. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to undo real quick. We have our selection still active. I'm going to go to select and down to select and mask. Okay, and there we're going to see basically all I'm going to do is add a little bit of smoothing to my selection. So it says output to selection here. Let's hit OK. And then here on this new layer, we're going to go ahead and fill this with black. And you can see it's just a little bit better of an edge there. It's a little bit too much actually. So let's just try that again. So select and mask. And we'll just put a little bit of smoothing in there. All right, and fill that with black. Perfect. So let's go ahead and move this over to our other layer now. And obviously those horns are way too small, so we're gonna make them larger. There we are. And let's make them a little bit smaller. And the other thing that we're gonna do is basically take these and put them on two separate layers. So I'm gonna select that layer and I'm gonna hit Control or Command X to cut it out, and then Shift Command V is gonna paste that right back in. All right, and I actually want the horns to kind of look like this. So there we go. Let's go ahead and rotate those around. And we've got some horns on our subject, because after all, this is the demon barista of State Street. She needs horns. There we go. This is so fun. All right, let's go ahead and bring our subject down just a little bit more. Make sure that these horns are in our subject group. We'll just bring the subject down just a little bit. All right, there we go. So we can see now our subject silhouette. We've got everything looking good. The next thing we're gonna do is bring our apron onto this photo. All right, so here we have our picture of our apron. Now I'm gonna use my move tool and click and drag right over, hit F for full screen. Now again, this is way too small, but it's not that big of a deal because all I really need is the outline of the apron. So let's just make it bigger. I'm gonna lower the opacity of this, and basically I just wanna size it about in place here. All right, there we go. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I just wanna get it to about, there we go, about where we're going to see it on our subject. So every good barista needs an apron. All right, so let's go ahead and zoom in. Now I'm gonna use my magic wand tool again here, and we're just gonna select out, here we go. We're gonna select out these little shoulder straps here. And don't worry if it's not perfect. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, what we're gonna do is on a new layer, okay, I'm gonna go to Edit and then down to Fill, and we're gonna fill this with, in this case, I'm gonna fill it with white just so I can see what I'm doing. All right, and let's go ahead and make our subject invisible. So you can see, basically just apron transplant, right? Really, really quick and easy. That took almost no time at all. Now I do want to do a little bit of cleanup here. I kind of like how it's a little bit jaggedy looking here, but here we need to make it look like it's actually around our subject's neck. So I'm just gonna grab my lasso tool here, and we're gonna go right up, over top around there, and come right back down. I'm gonna hit Shift Delete, and we'll just fill that with white. And there we go. Let's just go ahead and delete that little part of it out. And we'll just delete that little part of it out. And we'll just add this here. All right, Shift Delete, and fill that with white as well. All right, that looks pretty good. Now you can see the edge is just a bit jagged, and I do want it actually to be a little bit smoother. Fill that with white too. So let's make this a selection. I'm gonna hit Control or Command and click on this layer, which actually just turns the entire layer into a selection, which is really cool. Now what you can do is go to Select, and then same thing like we did earlier here. We're just going to create a new layer. We're gonna go to Select and down to Select and Mask. Okay, in our view, let's go ahead and choose the overlay view. And here we're gonna just add a little bit of smoothing to this edge. And there we go. And you can see the more smoothing I add, basically just like makes the edge just a little bit, well, it makes it smoother, obviously. All right, there we go. And let's just bring that down just a little bit. So we'll hit OK. Now in this case, I could actually see that apron. Let me just try showing you guys this. Basically, you could see the apron, so it wasn't really helping that much. So let's go ahead and make that a selection. And then on this layer, so you can see, you can't see the apron now. Let's go to select, down to select and mask. There we go. So this is the original selection from the apron itself. And you can choose all kinds of different views here. So we're just going to choose the overlay view. And this is where I'm going to add in my smoothing. And here you can see it's actually smoothing, right? So there's the original. And as I add a little bit more smoothing, it just starts to look a little bit better. All right, and let's add a little bit of contrast here as well. And that's just going to kind of sharpen those edges up a little bit more. All right, that looks pretty good. So now that I have that as a selection, okay, what we can do now is I'm going to create a new layer and we're going to fill this with white again. So basically with that process, what we did is went from this, which is kind of like jagged looking. Let me just zoom in. We went from that jagged looking apron to one that's just a little bit more smooth. All right, pretty cool. Now let's go ahead. We're just going to fill this with white as well. And basically this is just little detail work, things like that. So the next thing I want to do is we're actually going to hold Control or Command and click on this apron. And I'm going to load that as a layer mask for my subject. So let's click on our layer mask icon. Now it's actually inverted, so let's hit Control or Command I, and there we go. So we can see our subject is now wearing an apron, which is really, really cool. And I'm just going to select there on the bottom and fill that with black. All right, so now our subject is wearing an apron and our subject is wearing some horns. How cool is that? Okay, so we're really, really rocking with this. Everything is really nicely organized. We have, see our other apron photo. We have our apron that was in the making. So basically we just stole this apron with a selection and then I just refined the selection a little bit more. So let's just kind of like count you down on here a little bit. There we go. So we basically had our subject. We threw that apron on top of our subject. And then I selected that subject out, or selected the apron. And then we refined that a little bit and then loaded that selection as a layer mask for our subject. And that's what makes it look like our subject's actually wearing the apron. But you can see through it down to the coffee texture right down below. Okay, looking really good. The next thing we're gonna do is pull in our logo that we actually designed before this episode, but it just kind of like completes the image. All right, so here's our logo. Let's go ahead and use our move tool. I'm gonna click and drag our logo from one image to another. There we go. And here we have our Hell Brew coffee. And we're gonna go ahead and convert this to a smart object because I'm gonna make it smaller and I don't want it to lose definition. So let's right click here. We're gonna go to convert to a smart object. And let's go ahead and resize this down. It's a little take on Starbucks if you haven't noticed. There we go. And we're gonna go ahead and bring this right to about there. And I'm gonna invert this. So Control or Command I is gonna invert that. Basically, anything that was white becomes black and vice versa. All right, we are looking really good. So our subject's almost done. The last thing I wanna do is just create like a small line here right around the edge. There we go. Just to give our subject a little bit more shape down here. And I'm just doing this with the lasso tool. Again, we kind of want this to look like, to kind of look like it's like pretty rough. All right, and this is just a style thing. So let's fill that with black on a new layer. And you can see that just adds a little bit of an edge. So really cool. You just do this with your lasso tool, just like that. And it'll create something that looks like this. Just like gives our image, completes it to the end. Okay, cool. So we're actually almost done with our movie poster. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna take our background here and I'm gonna load a layer mask onto the background. So let's click on our layer mask icon. Now with this, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make a selection here. We're gonna go down and we're gonna choose the rectangle tool. There we go. And with this rectangle, I'm gonna hit Control or Command T to transform. And basically the idea here is we kind of want this to look like a cup of coffee. So I'm gonna grab one of the corners here and hold Control or Command. And also I'm gonna hold Shift and also Option. So we're doing all three here. It's Shift, Option, and Command. There we go. And we're gonna go out to the edge there. And then I'm gonna come right back down here and we're gonna pull this in here a little bit. This is what's known as the perspective. Okay, perspective control, but it basically just allows you to create like a trapezoid looking thing. Okay, so we want it to look like the whole thing is like in a coffee cup. Again, we're playing up the idea. We got a murderous, crazy demon who works for a coffee shop and she kills people and puts parts of them into people's coffee. Pretty gross, but hey, it's a horror story. Okay, so now that we have that shape, that looks pretty good. Looks like a nice tall coffee cup. We're gonna hold Control or Command and click on that, okay, which turns it into a selection. And then here, remember we have this background. Here on my background, I'm gonna hit Control or Command I to invert that. And then we're gonna deselect and then invert again. Okay, so here we have basically our coffee cup. Now, our subject, we can still move around at any time that we want. Anything that's inside of our background group, we can move this around at any time if we want. Like we can, change how this looks, because that's basically how the layer mask works. All right, layer mask just allows you to display what's visible or not visible in a layer, but you can still move all this stuff around inside of there. All right, guys. Well, basically, we just got a logo and some text to throw on our image, and we're gonna be done. So let's go ahead and throw our logo in. Now, I'm gonna use my Move tool, and again, this is just something we designed right before this episode. It's just using the Type tool, so nothing too incredibly complex going on here, but basically just, the demon barista of State Street. Now, let's go ahead and we're just gonna make this just a little bit larger, and I'm gonna hit Control or Command A to select everything, and click on our Move tool. We're gonna use the vertical align, which is super helpful. Like if you're over here and you just want it to be centered with their whole document, Control or Command A, Move tool, and then vertical align, you can see it just makes it perfect. All right, so no more guessing about where the center is for anything. All right, I actually really like this. I think it's a lot of fun. Now I'm gonna I wanna lighten up the bottom part of the coffee mug or whatever it is a little bit. So let's go to a curves adjustment layer. Okay, we're just gonna make this a little bit brighter. Ooh, that's kind of adding some weird color to it too. Not so nice actually. Let's go ahead and delete that. Let's create a new layer. I'm just gonna do this a different way. G for the gradient tool, and we're gonna click on our gradient editor. We're gonna go foreground to transparent and white to transparent. So basically just going white to transparent, and I'm just gonna lower the opacity of that. It was adding all kinds of weird saturation when I was making it brighter earlier. Didn't really work for me. All right, cool. We got one more thing to do because I forgot earlier. We're gonna make a knife. It's really easy to do. Basically just grab your pen tool. I'm gonna click here. We're gonna click right out there, and then here, I'm gonna click and drag out in this direction, just like this, until we have something that looks like a knife. There we go. And hold Alt or Option. We're gonna grab that, put it right there, and I'm gonna right click here, or go to Make Selection, and I'm gonna not feather this at all. We want a very sharp knife. And then on a new layer, we're gonna hit Shift Delete, and we're gonna fill that with black. All right, and there we go. So now we have like a knife. We don't need to do the handle because that's in our hand, but the knife here, we can just like move around and rotate and things like that. There we go. Let's bring that up just a little bit more. Yeah, I love it. All right, we got a little bit more. I'm gonna hit T for the Type tool, and we gotta put our tagline in there. All right, I know you can't read that right now, so you're just gonna have to be surprised. Let's go to Window and down to Character. Let's go ahead and we're gonna make that black. All right, and just give it a font there, and let's go ahead and give it, there we go. We'll make it bold too. So here's our tagline, revenge is best served venti. And we're gonna go ahead and I can't take credit, by the way. We have some wonderful geniuses working here. They came up with this. All right, we're gonna bring this over here. You know, like on a drink when it's like, caution, this drink is really hot. We kind of wanted to make it look like that. So there we go. And let's bring, beautiful. And there is our tagline. All right, guys, well, we are done with our second horror movie poster. Okay guys, that's it for part 2 of our trilogy on horror movie posters. And don't forget, this was a tutorial, but it's also a contest. We want you to create your own DIY horror movie poster images, and you can submit them. You just follow the link on your screen right now or in the description right down below. You submit them on Phlearn.com, you could win a free year of Phlearn Pro. That's every tutorial we've ever made. Photoshop brushes, actions, Lightroom presets. It's an incredible value. You can win it just by being creative and making some freaky stuff for Halloween. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next week in part 3 of our trilogy, Horror Movie Poster Month. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.